Keeping in line with the overall objective of the event, which was to share perspectives, what I decided to do was to share with you how I have learned how to make a decision. There are things that have helped me along the way in the past 2 decades or so, that I have worked in the industry, I have worked in the academia, I have studied a variety of different topics, and all of them have taught me something. Now, the topic of sense-making, the topic of cognition, how people decide, is a well-tread path as such. Now, if you look at the literature out there, there are so many people that talk about this. There are people who are academics, people who are just business thought leaders. There are folks who have done experiments, who go through this whole process of collecting data in a very rigorous manner, and they write things about how people think and what they do, what they don't do. And then there are other people who talk about just flaws in human perspective and the way we think, how we think we are rational, but we end up making very irrational decisions. So this is something that I think I do not want to belabor the theory or the research aspect of it. What I thought what I would like to do instead is just share with you what I have learned myself. This is not through a very scientific process. This is not something that I have investigated in a very rigorous manner. So the results are not generalizable, but something that has held me in good state. It has really helped me out. Now, I also wanted to mention that although there's a lot of research that is going on out there, I do not think there is something that for all of us we can use to improve our decision making. I think it is more of sensationalism. They do try to highlight some instances where people made a decision which was sort of funny if you look back and say, how could we do something like this? But what should we do instead is sort of not out there. So I think the state of the art is not at the place where I hope it would be in the next 5 to 6 years where we can benefit from it. So what I'm hoping instead, that this interaction that we're going to have today, I will give you a few nuggets, hopefully, things that have worked very well for me, although this is not something, as I said, scientifically discovered, but meaningful for you. And number 2, I will also share the process of discovery, that how did I discover these ideas that I have started using have become a very central part of my thinking. So that process itself would be the other learning, hopefully, that will go with you. Lastly, before I get into the presentation, I wanted to acknowledge something, that when I look at the TED or TEDx speakers, there's something very common. There's a common thread. They're unique people. And when I started looking at myself, there's nothing unique about me. I am as common, as boring, as unimpressive as you can imagine it to be. So I had to make sense of it. How come I've been asked to speak? So I thought that a typical TED speaker is a unique person. So therefore, a common person can be a unique TED speaker. So give me that latitude, allow me to speak, and with that I'm going to step into what I wanted to share with you. I'm going to start with 3 different stories. These stories have come about naturally as I went through my life. And I drew some insights from this. It was only in this manner this happened. It was not that I had the insights and I put a story to it. It was not like that. The stories came first. And in the second part, I will try to quickly distill those 3 things that have really been very successful for me. So the story number 1. This goes as, it's called Pascal's wager. It's called Pascal's gambit. This gentleman named Pascal, I'm sure you have heard of him. Now this person was intrigued. When he was alive, there was this whole discussion around the Renaissance was going around and people were trying to question every artifact of human faith. That can you prove something? Is this scientifically discovered? How can you say what you're saying is true? Do you have data to back this up? So one of the questions that was very central to all the discussions at that time, how should I live my life? Should I be pious? Should I be helping people, be nice, be fearful of God? And what should I do? It was a very difficult challenge for this gentleman because he said, before I could decide how I should live my life, I need to know this, whether there is God or there is no God. Right? And I want to, another disclaimer, this is not about whether we should be living as if there is God or not a God. This is not a religious sermon, so please, but there is an interesting insight that will come out of this story. So he did a thought experiment. And the simple thought experiment was that suppose you know a person, he's a great scientist, he collects a lot of data, he's very rigorous in his insights and the conclusions, and he comes to you, scenario 1, and says, by the way, I've done the analysis, and I can tell you conclusively that there is a God in this whole world. There is a God. So you believe this, and then you start living your life as if there is a God. And he said, then you assume another scenario, scenario 2, in which this gentleman comes, again, very impeccable credentials, and says, there is no God. And then you go and start living your life. You're not really on the straight and narrow, right? You think things that are not really acceptable, but who cares? No one is watching, right? Now he said, let's revisit scenario 1. You've been told there is God. You lived your life. Now you're on your deathbed. And the same gentleman comes and says, I've got a news for you. I think I made a small calculation error. There was a rounding off problem. Actually, there is no God. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Right? You first of all, you slap him, you curse him. Hey, there's no God. You do what you have to do. And then you say, damn it, missed an opportunity. I could have done something. Right? But that's about it. Your regret stays only to that limit. Now go back to scenario 2. Same gentleman appears and says, you know what? I think I made a mistake. There is a God. What do you think you're going to say? Oh, right? Now you have something serious waiting for you in the afterlife. And you are on your deathbed. There is no recovery. You're done. Yes? So 2 scenarios. You made an assumption, and you came back with very different type of outcome. So the question was, in the first scenario, I assumed something, took a decision, and in the end, I found out that the assumption was completely wrong, but the price was sort of okay. Whereas in the second one, I made a decision based on an assumption. The assumption was wrong. Now I've got hell to pay, literally, right? So if you look at this situation, there is a dominant decision. There is a dominant outcome. There is a robust decision. There's a no-brainer. In his mind, it was just live as if there is God. You're safe. Very important consideration. If I look at some of the big challenges that we all face, we cannot make up our mind what is going to be happening in the future, because if I don't know it, how should I decide what should I do? So we start collecting data, we put probabilities, we do all sorts of things, and then we roll the dice, right? Versus a process like this can help you come up with a better decision that completely makes the need for data analysis go away. It's irrelevant. It's not needed. You're absolutely fine, right? Story number 2. This comes from the science world. There's this virus called Toxo Virus, okay? This is a very interesting virus. It procreates in the gut of the cat. Yes, that's the way it procreates and reproduces itself. And it has a very strange property. What it does, whatever organism this virus gets into, infects, it changes the way they think. Now, there are enough studies done that talk about this from the medical point of view, and many of you may even know that doctors tell a pregnant woman to stay away from kitty litter. This is not safe. And many people in the world are infected by this virus, and the hypothesis is that people who are infected by this virus, they become fearless. Now, fearless not in a good way, but they start taking more risks. Now, that's the side story. Important story is I am Toxo Virus, right? Now, the way I procreate, I'm in cat's gut. Now, I come outside the feces of the cat. What is my objective? You've heard about selfish genes, right? One of the key objectives of an organism is to procreate. I have to find a way to get back inside cat's gut. That's my goal in life, yes? I look around. What is it that I can get into that can then get into the cat? One obvious thing is a rat or a mouse, right? The rat eats dirty stuff. I can get inside a rat, and the rat is eaten by the cat, and that's it. But not that simple. Because the cat and the rat, they don't mix together well, right? The cat is trying to go after the rat is running away. My objective is the rat that I'm inside should get inside the cat somehow, right? That's my goal, if I look at it in a very selfish way. Guess what happens? The rat that is infected by this virus starts behaving in a very unusual manner. The virus affects the brain and makes the rat fearless. Not only fearless, now the rat gets stimulated by the smell of cat's urine. So in fact, it goes towards the cat, gets inside the cat again, and the story goes on. Right? Very interesting stuff. But what did I learn? The idea was we have two organisms. There's a cat and a rat. There is a certain dynamics, right? They do what they do. Think about a system. They have two components. There are two parts to it. They do what they do, but we strangely see some strange behavior at odd times, not on a consistent basis, but off and on. There is something strange that happens. I'm unable to explain this. And the typical thought process is, let's go and try to understand what's happening in these different components. The reductionist scientific view of looking at the components to explain the system. That's how we teach our students. Break it down, try to understand the components. What I learned was that in this case, there's this system between the cat and the rat, the virus, which is a completely, you can't even see it outside of this system thing, that is its own objective. It has hijacked this system and tried to use it for its own purpose whenever it's needed. So what they did was it changed the interaction between these two things that was behaving in a certain set way. To me, this was very interesting. And we will figure out how do we use this in our daily life. This changing the interaction without really doing anything else, but changing the interaction between the components of a system. The third story. This is a very personal story. This is 2008, in about August. My daughter was 5 years old, and she has shown some inclination or leaning for mathematics. Now, most of you are from India, so you know. The fathers get excited when the kids like math. So I said, okay, I'm going to do my best to promote this. So there's a school. I'm not going to take the name. I guess there'll be an advertisement for the school. But it's a special school. They teach math in a very strange way, in a different way. And I used to live in Newton, Massachusetts at that time. And there used to be these evening classes, and I was thrilled. And I said, I'll make the commitment. I'll come home early, and I'll take her. Her name is Hina. So we went to the school, and they said, we're going to test her and see where does she stack up, and then we're going to put her in the right class. So imagine this. There's a small room. It's a school, sort of school. And there's a small table, small chairs. I'm sitting on those kids' chairs. And Hina is sitting next to me. Her legs are on the chair, and she's on the table with her hand, and she's using the crayons to color something. And the teacher is sitting right across. And she's asking basic questions, 2 plus 4, 5 plus, okay, go, go, go. And she's raising the bar. Then she said, I'm going to ask you a word problem. I said, okay, this I have not done with her, so let's see how she's going to do it. And all the while, she's just doodling and scratching. So she said, there's a situation that there are two kids, Marie and Joe. They started reading stories, and after an hour, Marie has read 15 stories, and Joe has read 10. How many more stories does Joe have to read to catch up to Marie? I said, okay, this is a word problem, easy peasy. She should be able to deal with this. And she didn't bat an eye. She said something, and she's all the way doodling. She said, you have to ask Marie to stop reading. So I said, what? So I was thinking 5, 5, 5, do 10, 15 minus 10, go ahead. And the teacher is looking at me also. We're all thinking about what happened here. But that was the right answer. She's reading too fast. This dummy will never catch up to her, right? Unless she stops and you give him extra time. The question never stated that. The question said, when will? How many more books? If she would have said in 1 hour, okay, Maria's read 15. 3 hours, the answer is different. But I was making an assumption that it is a single variable. Only Joe is moving. Marie has already stopped. No one said that. But I'm looking at it as a math problem. She is looking at it as a problem. The problem was, they will never catch up. Yes? But I'm looking at it and say, oh, no, no, no. This is a math problem. Never catch up is not a math situation. I need to have numbers. Numbers are 15 and 10. You minus, subtract, and 5 is the answer. So let me just try to put this all together. So when I look at these three stories, the first one, when I look at the Pascal's wager, that there are so many times, and I have done this myself, people do it, collect the data, understand the problem very well. What's really going on? Do you know the situation very well before you can even start doing any sort of analysis to come up with a decision? This shows that in many cases, not in every instance, there are situations where if you go through a process like this, if there is a complete unpredictability about a trend or a driver, just make an assumption that driver took an extreme value of X, but the question is, so what? Because the event itself is not the driver of your answer. It is the effect of the event that decides what are you going to do. And similarly, if you go to the other extreme, you may find out, in many cases, the effect is the same. You just do the same thing. You don't have to worry about any sort of analysis to start thinking about if and but and probabilities and such. So this is what I do now whenever I'm confronted with a very significant issue. The first question I ask is, are there these boundary conditions, extreme conditions, that are going to change the effect and make me come up with a different answer? If the answer is no, I'm okay. I just go ahead and look for so what, the effect, and come up with the answer. Number two, when I look at the Toxo virus, it became a very interesting insight that when we teach our students, we focus on the component. We always say, understand what's going on in each component. Let me take a simpler example. 5 plus 5, this is the system. Total is 10. If I ask you to increase this, focus on the components, you say, double both the components, 10 plus 10 is 20. Instead, if you focus on the interaction, if you make plus a multiplier, that's 25. You haven't touched the component itself. We rarely do that. For that, you have to have a synthetic mind. Instead of analysis, you have to do synthesis. You have to bring in other variables into the picture. Can I have leverage from outside? That brings you to the systems view. Do not go for the reductionist view as the way to think about a solution. There are other ways to do it. And then what Hina taught me was very simple. I always ask this question. And one thing was also very clear, that real life problems do not have a solution. Most of the problems cannot be solved. We have to transform them into something that I can handle them with the knowledge that I have. And the moment I have changed the question, I have transformed the question, I have changed the solution space. The answer is not going to be exactly what the real situation wanted. So the insight that I got was that every time I'm working, especially on a complicated problem, and I have gone deep into it, I always stop myself and say, am I even answering the right question? Is this even the right question that should have been answered? That if I arrive at the solution, would it really do what it is supposed to do? With that, thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoy it.